Next question, the Game Cup Dog is asking, how would making procedural meshes from scratch in ProtoFlux work? What features would be needed? So there's like two ways that's going to be possible. One, there's a mesh DSP that's planned, and it's like, sort of like data processing pipeline where, for example, you have like a node, and like the node is, say like it's a mesh source. Maybe like it gives you like a grid. This gives you like a grid, and you say, I want this grid to be like, 10 by 10, and then maybe, you feed it to a node where, it takes a texture and say like you have some kind of noise texture, and, it displaces the grid, it does a thing, and maybe you feed it to another thing, which, maybe voxelizes it, does like processes. And as you change these parameters, it kind of goes through this pipe and makes like, spits out like a mesh at the end of it. So you can have like a bunch of meshes that are sort of like sources. You can, feed those, and, do various processing on them, various filtering. The other aspect to this, which is also going to plug into this, is like being able to just build a mesh from scratch, from the primitives, which is very likely going to work in a way where you have like, some kind of like ProtoFlux function. And what it's gonna need is collections. And essentially, you get like an impulse, and then what do? You have like, some kind of like for loop. And this is backwards for you. You have like, a for loop, and you just like, you build out like, a list of triangles, and you compute their positions, and you pretty much like do whatever you want. You add like, vertices, you add triangles, you build a mesh, literally from those primitive presets, do whatever math you want, and once it finishes, you have your procedural mesh. And this is, this mesh is like parameterized by some things. So, you can, for example, have like whatever values, and they plug into this, and you literally just, you build the vertex by vertex, triangle by triangle, you position them however you want. This will give you, the ultimate kind of flexibility to build procedural meshes. And the cool thing is, like, once you have this, this you can then wrap into its own node, so it's going to become like, its own node. And, it outputs like a mesh that it generates, and then you can actually put it like, through another filter. Maybe apply, subsurface subdivision, kind of make it smoother and so on. So that way, we can kind of compose these things, these systems will kind of like interact with each other. One of the goals is also for the procedural meshes is like, let me actually know the brushes. One of the goals for the procedural meshes is like, once we have the definition, and kind of talked about this in one of the recent resonances, there should be like a video, but once you have the definition of it, this actually becomes a component, so like you have two parameterizations, say like A and B, and then this becomes a component. You can just, attach this your procedural mesh, and you have, you have your A and B, and you just, plug values, and it just like, runs your code on a background thread to generate that mesh. So I think that's going to be like a really cool, really powerful mechanism for building, procedural assets on your own. It's I was kind of want to work similar for like, textures, where you literally just loop through all the pixels, do whatever math you want to compute each pixel, and then we know that we make a procedural texture, send it audio, just, compute the individual samples. We just kind of work like, from the basic primitives that these assets are composed of.